Let me ask you this morning, have you ever had something so obvious in your life? I mean, it was after the fact, you realized how obvious it was, and yet in the heat of the moment, you didn't see that thing, though it was practically going to slap you upside the head. I mean, it was so obvious. It was painfully obvious, maybe to everybody else around you, and yet you couldn't see it. How many have ever experienced something like that? You're like, oh man, how did I miss that? How did I not see the truth of this particular situation? Maybe it's something where you just didn't want to see the truth. Maybe you were like willingly being ignorant about the facts because you didn't really want to accept the truth. Or maybe it's something where it's just, I don't know, it's one of those facepalm kind of moments like, oh, man. This morning I'm going to be sharing a message called Answer the Door. That's Jesus knocking. And we're going to be talking about just one of those kind of facepalm moments where it's like, how in the world did we not see the reality of this? In the summer of 1938, there was this particular gentleman, and he was kind of into weather, and so he ordered a barometer. How many know what a barometer is, okay? He ordered a barometer and had it delivered to his home. Now, this is 1938, so this is before the days of FedEx or online ordering, and so things took a little bit longer, and so he had placed the order in the summertime, but he actually didn't get his barometer until September. And so this thing comes in the mail eventually, and he's probably like my wife. My wife is the kind of person, I mean, a package comes, she wants to rip that thing open, doesn't matter. She's ready to just tear into it. Maybe some of you are like this. She's like, yeah, obviously. I'm not really that way. I kind of just set it aside and just like wait for the right time to open it, a special time. And she's like, no, just rips into it, okay? Well, this guy's like that. He digs into this thing right away. He's excited for, his barometer to get there. Immediately he pulls this thing out and he starts tinkering with this device. He's excited to check it out. But after just a few minutes of having this thing, he begins to realize, to his disappointment, that the needle on the barometer is stuck pointing to the word hurricane. And so he tries everything he can. He taps on it a little bit, and that doesn't work. And so then he shakes it kind of violently, and that doesn't work. And pretty soon he's hitting it a little bit harder, and nothing will dislodge the needle from pointing at the word hurricane. And so after a few minutes of frustration, this guy, he sits down, he writes a scathing letter to the company that he had ordered this from, and says, basically, you sent me a piece of junk. This was supposed to be a high-quality device, and it's junk. Writes the letter. The next morning, on his way to work, he lives on Long Island in New York, and he heads into New York City, drops the letter off in the mail, goes to work. Well, unfortunately for this guy, the company that he had purchased the barometer from was not able to help him out with the device because, you see, when he got home that evening from work, his barometer was missing. But I don't think that he probably was too concerned about the missing barometer because, you see, the reason his barometer was missing, his entire house was gone. And you probably figured out why. His house was gone along with 57,000 other homes because of the great and famous New England hurricane of 1938. It had been telling him the truth all along. He had the truth right before him, and yet he could not see that was the truth. He assumed, because of whatever ideas he brought to the table, that this thing was busted and it was trying to communicate a message to him that entire time. True story. Have you ever had the truth so plainly in front of you, practically screaming at you, and still not been able to see it? Let me read this morning from the book of John. John chapter 20. Starting in verse 1, it says this. It says, early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one who Jesus loved, that's John, and said, by the way, I love how John is so sneaky. He's like, because this is his book, and he's like, yeah, the other one, the one who Jesus loved. He just likes to throw those in there. And if you read through this, there's a few other instances. He's really good about that. But anyhow, she goes to the disciples and she says, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they've put him. Now, the next few verses, from verse 3 to 11, basically describes how Peter and John, they come to the tomb. They get there, they find the body is missing, they're confused, and after a few moments they leave, and Mary stays at the tomb. Okay, I'm just going to summarize that because we're not going to get into that this morning. Verse 11. Now, Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They've taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they've put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Verse 16, Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Just think about this for a second. Can you imagine that? Jesus is standing right in front of her, right before her, and yet she can't see it. Why? Well, we read in verse 15, she thought he was the gardener. I don't know if he's ever been mistaken for a gardener before that or since then, but Mary thought he was the gardener. But why couldn't she see it? I mean, if you know much about Scripture, you know Mary Magdalene spent a fair amount of time in Jesus' company, certainly enough time where she could have identified him and recognized him in just about any situation. Yet in this instance, she does not until he speaks her name. I wonder, what was it that blinded Mary that day? Hard to say for sure, but I wonder perhaps if it had something to do with the facts. Quote unquote, the facts. The things that Mary thought she knew as fact. For example, Mary knew the following. Mary knew that just a few days prior, Jesus had been crucified. She knew that he was dead. She knew that he had been laid in the tomb. Here's what else Mary knew. Mary knew that dead people don't raise themselves. She knew that. How many know that that's a fact? Okay? Mary knew that fact. Dead people don't get out of the grave, not unless Jesus is there to raise them up. And since Jesus was the one that was dead, she just figured that was a done deal. He's dead. He couldn't possibly have risen from the grave. But she also knows that if she's there, he's missing. And so using probably some logic, probably the only logical explanation was the one that Mary came up with, that somebody had moved the body. Somebody had tampered with this situation and had done something. Isn't it amazing how often our assumptions, our logic can betray us? The things that we assume and we figured out have to be true so often betray us. I mean, think about it. How many times have you assumed something only to find out that your assumption was a little off? Or maybe way off? How many have ever had that happen? You've made an assumption and later on you found out, maybe it wasn't everything I thought. It was. Assumptions can be a dangerous thing. In fact, most of us have been taught at some point in our life to never assume. Never assume. It's something that we train to our children. Well, you never want to assume. And yet, if we were to take a poll, many of us would have to raise our hand and say, I'm guilty of oftentimes assuming things. Of oftentimes just figuring things out on my own without collecting all the facts. Because let's face it, assuming feels easier. Assuming things is easier than digging up all the facts. Digging up the facts, that can be painful. Digging up the truth about a situation, that can be hard work. Digging up the truth of a situation can lead to some of those uncomfortable conversations if you actually get to the truth. And so assuming is kind of an easier thing to do. And let's face it, a lot of times our assumptions are correct. We make assumptions and they're correct, and that probably only helps to fuel the problem of us continuing to assume. And a lot of times our logic is correct. But the trouble is sometimes because we're dealing with other people don't always act logically. They don't always act rationally. And so even our logic can mess us up. Let me give you an illustration of this I think you'll relate to. As I asked you before, and most raise their hand, we've been guilty of assuming things and then not really having all the facts. Imagine you have a coworker. And you and this coworker don't particularly get along. Okay, I don't know how many that might hit home with somebody right then and there, okay? Like, that's me. Okay, so you got this coworker, you don't get along, there's kind of tension in the relationship, you're just different or whatever, and so you just, it's not your favorite person in the world. And now, because of that tension, it becomes very easy to begin to assume things about that coworker. For example, if the stapler on your desk disappears, you are very quick to instantly pin it on that coworker. Because in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, now hold on a second. About a month ago, I remember them talking about how they kept losing their staplers, so it had to be them. You don't go to, you just go right to the conclusion, well, they took my stapler. You didn't go to their desk to see if they did it. You just assume. Your lunch disappears from the break room fridge. Well, it had to be them. Look at, they put on like 10 pounds. Seriously. Susie's lunch was missing last week. Now it's my lunch this week. It had to be them. And we assume. We look at that situation and we think, okay, something like, oh, maybe we get up from our desk to go to the bathroom. We get there, it's the one stall bathroom, there's not a lot of options here, and so the door is locked. And you find out after the fact that they were the one in the bathroom, and then you start to think, they planned it that way. They saw me getting up from my desk across the room, and they quick went in there just to irritate me. I know it. They probably didn't even have to go to the bathroom. They were just trying to bug me. And we assume. How many understand assumptions can be dangerous things? In fact, that person take that coworker, whoever, they could do the nicest thing, the kindest thing. They could give us a warm greeting as we came into the office that morning. They could have a big smile, and we walk away because of the dangers of assumption. We walk away thinking, well, they didn't mean it. They were just faking it. That wasn't real. They can't stand me. Well, hold on a second. They gave you a big smile and said hello. What more do you want from them? They could buy you a Christmas present, and you would get mad about it. You'd be like, well, what are they trying to do? One-up me? I didn't buy them a Christmas present. And we get into these assumption games in our relationships, and it's dangerous when we do it. Mary, in this instance, assumptions in hand, can't recognize that Jesus is right there, though he is standing before her. He's even talking to her. He's even communicating with her. And it's because it's not rational. It doesn't make sense that Jesus would even be there. It doesn't compute as a possibility. I think that this morning, there's people in the room that your life fits that description as it comes to Jesus. Jesus is standing right in front of you. He's even trying to communicate to you. He's even trying to speak to your heart. But you have drawn whatever conclusions through skepticism or whatever that Jesus isn't real. Maybe you have looked at this whole church thing, this whole religion thing, this whole God thing, and you say, it's a hoax. It's some hokey religion. It's not real. Maybe you come here extremely skeptical about how could Jesus have risen from the grave? How is that even possible? It's impossible. I don't buy it. Maybe you're in the camp that Jesse Ventura was in, our late, or not late, he's not dead, but our former, not so great governor. Maybe you remember this quote. Jesse, once upon a time, said, organized religion is a sham and a crutch for weak-minded people who need strength in numbers. How many remember when that came out of the mouth of our former governor? Not maybe his finest hour. Maybe that's, as you hear that, organized religion is a sham and a crutch for weak-minded people. Maybe that's how you really feel. I mean, if we got to the heart of it, that's how you feel about religion, about God, about Jesus. That it's just really for the weak-minded. It's just a crutch. I don't know why you're here today. Maybe you are here out of being compelled by somebody else. Maybe you knew that if you didn't come today, somebody was going to make your life really miserable at brunch. You were going to have to listen to somebody talk about how you didn't come to church and you never come to church, and so finally you said, okay, I'm just going to do it to get them off my back. Maybe you came today because you feel like it's your religious duty to come on Christmas and Easter, and this is just kind of the thing you do but once or twice a year to fulfill some sort of obligation, but you really don't buy it. You're really not convinced that it's real. But let me ask you this morning, what if your assumptions are wrong? What if your assumptions are wrong? What if it's not just a sham? What if it's not just a hoax or a nice story? What if Jesus is actually standing before you as he stood before Mary, ready to call your name? What if the tomb is actually empty? Because Jesus actually conquered death, defeated the grave. What if he's really offering forgiveness to you and to each one of us as sinners? What if today your life could change forever? What if today you could know and understand what the Bible describes as peace that passes all understanding? If you could have that peace to rule over your life in the midst of the turmoil that you're facing and that each one of us face just by virtue of being alive. And yet, so many in this room would say, God's given me peace to face that. What if that peace could be yours? What if you could really know what happens to you when you die? You could really know this morning where you would spend eternity if your number was called, if your time was up. If you'd like that, if you say, that sounds good, but Pastor Ryan, I can't buy it. I can't get past it. How could he raise? Listen. Open up your heart and listen to what God is saying. Listen past what your mind is saying. Listen past what your guilt and your shame is saying. You know, guilt and shame, can I just say this? Guilt and shame, they are very good at serving as a blockade as far as us being able to hear the truth from God. Because guilt and shame, what they want you to believe is that you're too guilty, that you're too full of shame to actually be redeemable. You look at your life, you know the junk that you've done and the things that you've done, and you say, well, I'm kind of too far gone. That's what guilt and shame wants you to believe. Listen past that. Listen through that and press through that. Listen past the pain and the heartache that maybe has even been caused by a bad church experience. There's people in the room this morning, you've had a bad church experience. You've been burned by the institution of religion. You've been burned because at some point in your journey of life, you said, I'm going to give this church thing a try. I'm going to give this Christianity thing a try. And you tried following God, but then because you didn't fit some kind of a mold, you got burned in that church. You felt rejected and chewed up and spit out by a church or by several churches. You've tried it, and it's like there's pain, there's heartache, and I understand. That's very real, the emotions that come with that. But I want to encourage you this morning, listen past that. Listen past whatever your previous church experience has been, and listen, as Mary Magdalene did, to Jesus calling your name. Isn't it interesting? When Jesus said her name, everything changed. In his timing, he removed the blindness from her eyes. Whatever it was that kept her from realizing and seeing, whether it was her assumptions and her conclusions, now she could see the truth, and it was with a simple word. Verse 16, Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. Each one of us in this room who has responded to Christ has had a similar moment. We've heard Jesus call our name. We've heard in our heart Jesus call our name. See, the thing is this morning, you're not just a number in a mass of humanity. God didn't just send his son to die for the masses, so to speak. He sent his son to die for us individually, with a name, with a past, with a history, with a story. And yes, he died for everyone, and anybody, no matter what that story is welcome to come to him, and he will receive them. But it's good to know he knows your name. He's calling you by name. He's called me by name. Will you listen to it? And will you respond this morning? Revelation 3:20. Jesus says this. He's talking to the church in Laodicea, and he says, Here I am. I stand at the door and I knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in. I stand at the door and knock, and if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in. Let me ask you, could Jesus be knocking on the door of your heart today? Could he be knocking on the door of your heart? notice something. It's up to you to open the door. Jesus is knocking, but he will not barge in. He won't kick down the door. He won't force his way in. Have you ever had a persistent person on your doorstep knocking? Somebody that you didn't really want to answer the door for? Come on, who's ever been there? You didn't want to answer the door. Maybe it was that awkward moment where you were just hopping in or out of the shower and you had nothing but a towel on. You're like, I ain't going to go to the door like this. Okay, good. Don't go to the door like that, please. Maybe you saw, it looks like some religious nut's coming to, hand me a pamphlet or something, and you're like, oh, let's hide, and just pretend like we're not home, It's like, listen, they saw your cars in the driveway. They saw you close the blinds, okay? They know you're there. That's why they keep knocking. And they're not giving up. But the thing is if you waited out long enough, no matter how persistent that person is, if you waited out long enough, eventually they'll go away. Right? Eventually they'll go away. If you don't open the door for them, they're not getting in the house. Unless they're like a thief. Then maybe they will. If they're going to get in, it's going to require you answering the door. Before we moved to our new home over here in Waite Park, just about 2 years ago now, we lived over on the south end of town. We had this little neighbor girl. And she got to be good friends with a couple of our kids. Nice little girl. And so now it came time for us to, actually she moved and then we moved. And through that process, we sort of lost touch, but through some circumstances, we were able to get her our phone number, or particularly Crystal's cell phone number. And so turns out that where we moved to and where this girl moved to weren't really too far away. And so she was wanting to come over and play sometimes. And that was great. The kids loved her. And so she would call Crystal's phone and ask, can I come over to play? And so on a few occasions that had worked out. But this little girl, I think I have a new understanding of the word persistence with this little girl. Because sometimes she would want to come over and play, and it would be like, everybody was laying down for a nap. Maybe I'd be gone, working or whatever, and Crystal likes to get a good nap, and if she can, when you have 7 kids, you'd take a nap too, okay? So Crystal is trying to take a nap, and maybe she would even turn her phone off or turn the ringer off so that she wouldn't be bothered with that nap. And there was a few occasions, one time in particular, I think Crystal turned on her phone after her nap, and she had like 75 missed calls. That's not an exaggeration. It was just this huge number of missed calls from one little girl in like a 2-hour period. It was literally like call. And she wasn't leaving messages all the time, but she was calling nonstop. But it's interesting. Over the course of time, we've kind of lost touch with this girl. At some point, she stopped calling. At some point, she stopped coming over and hanging out with the kids. And she was a sweet little girl. And so now it's actually to the point where it would be kind of nice to get a call from her. It would kind of feel like, oh, cool, she hasn't forgotten us. She still likes our family. Cool, we'd love to have her come over. But we've kind of lost the numbers. And you'd think if somebody called your phone 75 times, you'd have that number programmed in, but nope. So we don't really have a way to call her. And so we've kind of lost touch. And it's kind of sad. We kind of miss this girl. Well, can I just tell you, friend, Jesus is persistent with his knocking. He's persistent with his call. He'll call your name. He will do whatever he can to get a hold of you. But the reality is this. Eventually, Jesus, because he's given us a free will, he will back off. He will back off. The truth is, God doesn't want a bunch of robots. He doesn't want a bunch of people that respond to him simply because they're forced to, because they've got a gun to their head. He wants us to respond to him out of our free will. And if by our free will we say, listen, I ain't answering the door, I'm not responding to the call, eventually, the word is clear, he'll back away. In fact, Hebrews chapter 3 says this. Chapter 3, verse 7, it says, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion during the time of testing in the wilderness, where your ancestors tested and tried me, though for 40 years they saw what I did. That is why I was angry with that generation. I said, their hearts are always going astray, and they have not known my ways. So I declared an oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest. See to it, brothers and sisters, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God, but encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. We have come to share in Christ if indeed we hold our original conviction firmly to the very end. As has just been said, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion. And I would say the same thing to you today as the band comes this morning and just begins to play. I would say this: respond while it's called today. Respond while today the opportunity is provided. Don't take the chance of your heart becoming hardened. Just as Mary Magdalene responded to Jesus some 2,000 plus years ago, some of you in this room, you're hearing him this morning. You're hearing him call your name. You felt that knock on your heart. You felt that stirring in your spirit. You didn't come here necessarily expecting to have an encounter with God. Maybe you came here, as I said before, out of religious duty or because somebody drug you along kicking and screaming, and you didn't think that God was going to have anything to do with this morning as far as actually getting a hold of your heart. But let me propose to you, Mary Magdalene did not expect to have an encounter with Jesus that morning at the tomb either. And still she did. Still she did. Let me ask you, will you respond to the knock on the door? Will you answer the door? That's Jesus knocking. What if all your assumptions about what you thought was true, what if they're wrong? What if what we've been saying is real? And God has a plan for your life. The Bible says in John 3:3 that unless a man is born again, he cannot inherit the kingdom of God. Cannot go to heaven unless he's born again, unless he responds to that call, unless he is reborn. And being reborn is simply a matter of taking that life that we've lived and saying, God, I submit it to you. I give it to you. Lord, I ask that your Son Jesus, who has died that my sins could be washed away, cast as far as the east is from the west. Lord, I ask that you would forgive me. And the Bible says that he will. That he will. If you will believe in your heart, he will. If you'll ask him to, he will. And then you'll be saved. You'll be born again. Without anybody looking around this morning, as we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the grave, the greatest single thing that we can do this morning is to provide an opportunity for those who might be here who have never taken that step to accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior. You're here, and let me tell you what you're feeling in your heart, that pounding in your heart, that's the Holy Spirit. He's convicting. He's showing you. He's opening up your heart. And listen, I don't care. I described a person that has only come to church once in a while, but you might be the person that comes to church all the time. It doesn't matter. You can come to church every Sunday of the year and still miss it. You can miss it. You can go through all the religious motions. That's not what Jesus is looking for. He's looking for followers. Committed followers. And so let me ask, Pastor Ryan, that's me. Without anybody looking around, slip up your hand. Say, I need to accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior this morning. Several hands. That's awesome. Anybody else? Just going to wait a few moments. Maybe you've done something like this before, but you know in your heart it's never really quite stuck. You've just kind of continued on the same path. You say, I think I need to make that commitment again. For real this time. Awesome. Awesome. Here's what I'm going to ask this morning. I'm going to ask if we're all going to say a sinner's prayer today. Now, if you raised your hand, here's the thing. This isn't a magical formula. It's not some prayer that you got to say it a certain way. You've got to mean this from your heart. You've got to mean, these are going to be my words, but you got to mean them from your heart. Take ownership of these words. Take ownership of these words. God, this is coming from my heart. And if you'll mean it, God will honor it. I believe that. We're gonna pray along just to help you out. And so I just ask, let's just repeat after me. Heavenly Father, I know that I'm a sinner. I know that I've fallen short. But I know that you've provided a way for me to be forgiven. And that way is Jesus. I thank you, Lord Jesus, that you gave your life at the cross, but that you're no longer dead. You're risen from the grave, victorious over death, so that I can have eternal life. Forgive me of my sin. Wash me clean. Make me a new creation. Help me to live for you. In Jesus' name. Amen. Listen, if you prayed that prayer this morning and you meant it, whether you prayed it for the first time or whether you've prayed it several times before, and like I said, it's just never really clicked for you, I want to invite you to come talk to me after service. We've got a resource that we would love to give you. It's called a New Believer's Handbook, and it's simply this. It's a way for you to kind of now take the next step. What does life begin to look like after we've taken this step? Because here's the thing. Taking a step like this to following Jesus isn't quite as simply as, okay, well, I did that. Now I'm just going to keep going on the same track. Listen, the same track's going to get you the same results. It's going to get you stuck in the same kind of sin that God just washed clean. You don't want to go there. And so God's going to begin to challenge you. He's going to begin to show you things in your life that need to change. Some of them aren't going to be easy to swallow. Some of them are going to be like, oh, Lord, really? But you got to remember, He doesn't do it to be a mean or a vengeance-filled God. He does it out of the love of the Father. Right? As a parent, we bring correction to our kids, not just to beat them up, but because we don't want them to get hurt. Because we want to protect them. Because we want to teach them. God will do that with you as your Father. He'll begin to challenge you and correct you. I would advise you, it might be hard to hear, but receive it. You'll begin to grow in your faith. God's going to begin to do new and incredible things in your life from this point forward. But I would sincerely invite you, come seek me out. And I'd love to just give you this resource and pray with you a little bit more. So, praise God. I think the band, maybe do one last song. And we're going to close it up here this morning. So, praise God. Let's stand to our feet this morning. The band will play. I'll be back to dismiss us in a moment.